The bells of Valoria rang with a solemn grandeur that seemed to shake the very foundations of the kingdom. From the highest towers to the cobblestone streets, the people gathered in throngs to witness the day their young queen would be crowned. Rose petals floated through the air like fragments of fire, falling upon outstretched hands, while banners embroidered with golden lions rippled in the morning breeze. Within the great hall of the palace, where vaulted ceilings soared like the nave of a cathedral, Queen Evelina stood still, surrounded by a flurry of attendants, who dressed her in the coronation gown. The gown was no mere garment. It was legend stitched into silk, woven with threads of silver and pearls gathered from distant seas. It was meant to embody the weight of sovereignty itself. Each fold carried the whisper of dynasties long past, each jewel symbolizing oaths sealed in blood and faith. Evelina's face, though pale with the weight of expectation, bore the composed grace of one raised to rule. She had been schooled for this day since childhood. The careful tilt of her chin, the steadiness of her gaze, the stillness of her hands. And yet, as the attendants fastened the final clasps, something within the gown caught at her, a whisper of parchment against her skin. At first, she thought it no more than a misplaced thread, a stiff lining pressed against her collar. But when the room emptied for her final moment of solitude, Evelina slipped her fingers into the inner seam and drew forth a folded piece of paper. Her breath caught. It was fragile with age, edges browned, the ink faded as though time itself had tried to erase it. Her eyes widened as she recognized the hand that had shaped those letters. It was not her husband's, the king she had been forced to wed for alliance. It was not her father's, nor any courtly hand. It was his, Adrian. The name burned through her chest like a forbidden flame. He had been the one she loved, the one she had walked the gardens with when dusk painted the sky in lavender hues, the one whose laughter had broken through her loneliness in a court of strangers, and the one her family had torn from her life when they bound her fate to a man she barely knew. Her heart trembled as she unfolded the letter, every movement slow, reverent, as though she feared the ink might vanish at her touch. My dearest Evelina, if you ever wear this gown, know that I placed these words here not in defiance, but in faith. Faith that someday you would remember not only your crown, but your heart. I was sent away, but I have not ceased to love you. If you feel this letter against your skin, know that part of me is still with you, even beneath the jewels and silks of power. If the day comes when you no longer hear my name in the wind, then burn this letter and let me fade. But if your heart still stirs, seek me by the old willow where we first swore our truth. Yours, beyond time, Adrian. Evelina's knees weakened beneath the weight of it, and she sat upon the carved oak bench in silence, the letter pressed against her chest. She could hear the echoes of his voice, tender, steady, filled with the conviction that once made her believe they could conquer the world together. Yet here she was, about to wear a crown heavier than her heart could bear. She had not spoken Adrian's name in years, not since the day her father had torn her hand from his and marched her down the aisle to a king twice her age. And though her husband was not unkind, he was a man of duty, of treaties and politics, not of poetry or stolen glances beneath moonlight. Tears pricked her eyes, though she dared not let them fall. Outside the chamber, the horns announced the hour had come. She folded the letter once more, tucking it against her skin, where no one would find it. But its presence was a secret fire, a pulse that reminded her she was not only queen, not only wife, but a woman who had once loved deeply. As Evelina stepped into the throne room, her people knelt, their cheers rising like thunder rolling across the marble. She walked with the regal composure expected of her, every movement slow and deliberate. Yet inside, her soul trembled with the echo of a forgotten promise hidden in the gown's seam. The crown was placed upon her head, its weight pressing against her temples like an iron band. She raised her eyes, meeting the gazes of thousands who hailed her as sovereign. They saw their queen dignified, untouchable, divine. But beneath the jeweled veil of power, Evelina clutched the memory of Adrian's letter, the one thread of her heart that defied the silence of the years. And so, the story began not only of a queen crowned in splendor, but of a woman torn between crown and heart, between duty and desire. For in the shadow of the throne, love had returned, not with flowers or whispers, but with ink that refused to fade. The bells of Valoria rang louder, drowning out her racing heart. Evelina lifted her chin, smiled with grace for her kingdom, and wondered, could a queen rule a nation while still being ruled by love? The first weeks of Evelina's reign unfurled like a tapestry stretched tight, every stitch woven with expectation, every thread pulled taut with scrutiny. From dawn until dusk, her days were dictated by council meetings, court audiences, and ceremonials that paraded her as both monarch and symbol. She sat upon the throne of Valoria, while ambassadors from neighboring kingdoms bowed and presented their gifts. She signed decrees with a steady hand while her ministers leaned close, whispering their guidance, each one eager to bend her will to their vision. To the eyes of her court, she was flawless, a young queen embodying grace, wisdom, and patience far beyond her years. The people adored her, for she carried herself not with cold detachment, but with a quiet dignity that seemed almost tender. They saw a sovereign who bowed her head to hear their petitions, who smiled softly at their celebrations. But within Evelina's breast lay a secret flame. The letter, still hidden within her chambers, pulsed in her mind like a second heartbeat. Some nights, she pressed it to her chest, as though the parchment itself could breathe life back into the memories of a love she had tried so hard to bury. Adrian's words had shaken her foundation more deeply than the crown upon her head. The gown had been made years before her wedding, a garment sewn in the months leading to her coronation. Had he truly placed the letter there, knowing someday she would ascend? How had he known it would survive years of wear, the touch of countless hands, the silent passage of time? And the greater question still, did he wait for her by that willow tree, as he promised? Or had those words been written in desperation, never meant to be answered? Her duties left little space for such thoughts, yet her heart refused to let them rest. One evening, after a banquet heavy with foreign dignitaries, Evelina slipped away from the grand hall. She removed the crown from her hair, feeling its absence like the first breath after drowning. She walked the corridors with her ladies trailing at a distance, her footsteps soft against the velvet runners. At last, she entered her private chambers and closed the doors. The letter lay in the drawer of her writing desk, folded with reverence. Evelina drew it out and traced the faded ink with her fingertip. The handwriting was familiar, bold, slanting, alive. Her throat tightened as she remembered the way Adrian used to hold her hands when they walked together in the gardens, speaking of a future that now seemed like a dream. That night, she stood at her window, gazing beyond the palace walls. In the distance, she could see the faint silhouette of the old willow tree on the hill, its branches like arms stretched toward the heavens. It was there, once upon a time, that she and Adrian had promised themselves to each other in whispered vows. The sight of it now was both comfort and torment. She could not go to him, not openly, not as queen. Every movement she made was watched, every step a matter of state. To pursue the ghost of a love forbidden by her crown would be to risk her throne, her people, her very life. And yet, she could not silence the thought. What if he was there still, waiting? Days passed, then weeks. Evelina buried herself in governance, in the endless scrolls of decrees and disputes. She toured the villages to show her people their queen was not a shadow locked in marble halls. She received praises, but also the weary cries of farmers burdened by taxes and widows broken by war. These voices stirred something deep within her, a determination to be more than a figurehead, to rule with justice and compassion. And yet, always, the willow called to her. It was on a rain-swept evening, when thunder rolled across the skies like distant drums, that Evelina made her choice, with her most trusted lady waiting asleep by the fire. She cloaked herself in plain riding garb and slipped from the palace stables. Her heart thundered louder than the storm as she mounted her horse and rode through the dripping fields. The willow stood waiting, its branches bowed by the weight of rain. Evelina dismounted, her hands trembling as she reached for the familiar bark. Memories flooded back, the first kiss they had shared beneath its shelter, the way Adrian had carved their initials into its trunk, as though to anchor their love against time itself. The grove was empty, only the sound of rain, only the sigh of wind through the branches. Her chest tightened with both relief and sorrow. What had she expected? That he would linger there for years, waiting for a queen who belonged to another. Perhaps the letter had been a farewell, not a summons. But as she turned to leave, her eyes caught something carved fresh into the bark. The rain made it glisten like ink. Her breath faltered as she traced the letters with her fingertips. I am still here. Her knees nearly buckled. The storm blurred her vision, though whether from rain or tears she could not tell. Adrian had been here recently, impossibly. He knew she had found the letter. The wind howled, carrying with it the ghosts of choices past and those yet to come. Evelina clutched her cloak tighter and mounted her horse once more. She could not linger, for dawn would soon break, and the queen must return to her palace, her throne, her mask. But her heart had changed. The crown might claim her daylight, yet the night now belonged to Adrian. And so, beneath the relentless storm, Queen Evelina rode back through the darkness, torn between the golden weight upon her brow and the shadow of a man who refused to let her heart forget.